Welcome to the stream, TradFi and Hex, featuring Professor Lamont Black, economist and skeptic in the Hex documentary, The Highest of Stakes. Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, Claire. Great to be here.
And Hodpro, Hex hodler and ambassador and long-term streaming friend. Hodpro, as always, thank you for being here.
Hello, you're awesome, both of you.
Oh, thank you so much. Now, first in the chat was actually Bob Wells this morning. I know his name is gone now because he must have posted that a while ago. But I appreciate Bob, and I see him in the chat a little bit there. So hi, Bob. Shout out to you. Balliot Brand, thanks for being here. Tin Top and Academiacid. I hope I pronounced your name right. Thanks all for being here. Please feel free to post questions. So guys, this is all about, Professor Black. He's an economist. We're gonna dive into some macroeconomics and how it relates to traditional finance and Hex. But first, I thought that I will show you the trailer again because I love this trailer.
Okay, we are set for you, Richard. What do you want people to know about you?
I got a big dick. This here is $3.1 million of watches.
I don't know world's biggest diamond. You don't. I do.
Who is Richard Hart? Genius.
Legendary.
Arrogant. Bit of a narcissist.
The benevolent king.
$250,000. Hate me. I'm farther than you'll ever be in your whole life.
Who does this guy think he is?
Whatever the governments have been doing, it's not worked out. You've never had worse interest rates. Your money has never been worth less. Everything is getting worse. The only thing that's making it better is cryptocurrency.
It's better than the dollar. It's better than gold. It's better money.
Crypto is money without governments, and it is money without banks.
You're not going to meet another product like this as long as you live. Yes, every scammer in the world is going to tell you something similar.
Good morning, everyone. Are you ready to look for some fraud this morning?
They are promising 40% annual percentage return.
I want to make people millionaires. I've made thousands of millionaires.
Richard Hart's Hex token is a brilliant scam.
Desperation has a look to it. And when you're looking for just anything, you will fall for anything.
Hex is going to be the new cryptocurrency. We'll take over the market. There isn't anything else out there that's worth the shit.
Everything I have worked for all my life is staked in Hex.
Good. I put it all in.
All in what?
All of our house money.
Why is it important to you?
I want to feel loved. Don't you guys want to feel loved? Everyone wants to feel loved, right?
Richard is the Messiah.
Savior.
God. That sounds like a Ponzi scheme.
Yes.
That you're incentivizing people to pull money off the market.
You know what? I think you just described a 401k.
If the music stops, they're sitting on nothing. X doesn't make money. That's where I'm so frustrated. What is the value?
Here's the benefits. Do you want to get rich?
No, I don't think that it's a scheme. Because I trust Richard Hart.
It seems like some of this is just a large performance art project. And if ultimately this is all a big performance art project, people are going to get fucked.
I mean, you can fool a couple people, but I mean, can you fool that many?
So then I should trust you.
Listen, I think you should trust me, but if you get into the habit of trusting people like me, you get the crap scammed out of you.
Woo. Yeah. Wow, that is epic. And I think that's a longer version. Oh, and my YouTube is playing in the background, so I'll just stop that. Wow. So Hodpro, you've seen the film. No spoilers. I'm from Australia, guys.
Spoil. No spoils.
So what kind of impact
in the movie, though?
Yeah, what kind of impact did the film have on you? Like, what did you get coming out of it?
I really liked it because it kind of was it was an introduction not just into crypto and Hex, and then ultimately PulseChain after that, talking about the fork, but just cryptocurrency in general, how people the past of it, what blockchain is, what a smart contract is, like with Ethereum, the utility of Ethereum, and really whether or not people believe in the blockchain, believe that it has monetary value, and it's up in the air sometimes because people aren't quite sure whether something's a scam or if it's real or what the utility of it is. So it's really a film. It's about Richard Hart and Hex, but it's about crypto and legacy finance as well. So I thought it was wonderful. I really liked the movie a lot. And I like the different perspectives too. Yeah.
Oh, I'm glad that there's some broader sort of principles that are going to come through. So Professor Black, what's it like seeing yourself there in the highest of stakes trailer?
Yeah, it is a little weird. It's funny how they kind of wove me in there with Richard. So it's funny, but yeah, I saw it last weekend, and it is weird, looking up, seeing yourself on the big screen. But I'm proud of what I've done, and it's kind of a once in a lifetime opportunity. So I've been very thankful.
Definitely. Was it strange to sort of like see yourself, like hear your own voice? Did you have to like glue your face to make sure that you watched yourself, or you were like this?
Yeah, that thing of like, you feel like you sound funny, and then like I noticed like my hair and things. I was like, oh.
I forced myself to watch my streams back, and I always think I sound like my sister, and I'm like, oh my God, I wish my sister would just stop talking. Anyway, so we're going to make a quick stream today, guys, because Professor Black has been so generous, and he's going to be streaming with other members of the community, so we can't tire him out all on one stream. So it's a 45-minute stream, so we're going to do some economics, traditional finance, and Hex, and we're just going to smash it out. Post your questions in the chat. We'll get to that. And then me and Hodperl might just talk a bit more in general about PulseChain at the end. So Professor Black, first question apart from the movie questions. What role does the Federal Reserve play in controlling the fiat supply, and what relationship does it have to the government and banking system?
Yeah, so I think most folks probably know this now, but prior to DePaul, I was an economist at the Fed in DC. And so, the Fed is the central bank for the US. Every major developed country has a central bank, European Central Bank, Bank of Japan, and so on. And if you're going to have fiat currency today, you basically have to have a central bank because it's centralized currency. So the central bank manages the supply of that currency. And that's what the Fed's doing when they raise and lower interest rates. And so, during COVID, when they were lowering interest rates, that's equivalent to printing money. Now that they're raising interest rates, that's equivalent to pulling money off the market. And so their job is price stability. And so they're using the money supply to try and manage inflation. And their target is the 2% inflation rate. So better or worse, I know a lot of folks in DeFi hate central banks, but price stability is very helpful for an economy, and that is certainly one way to achieve it, is by having that centralized authority to manage it. The way they do monetary policy is basically pushing and pulling liquidity into the banking system. And so, when banks have more reserves, federal reserves, they can then lend more money and so on. And so that's why monetary policy is a form of economic stimulus when you're printing money, and then economic contraction when you're removing money. So their mandate is actually twofold. It's not just price stability, but also maximum employment. And so they're also trying to manage the economy. They try and prevent recessions. They try and prevent the economy from overheating.
Yeah, I like your answer there. Just a couple of things from a skeptical kind of perspective. Like they need to manage the economy perhaps because every year they print 5% of the money supply. What is the reason for the money printing, and why did they stop? What was the reason that they stopped backing their money supply with gold?
Okay, so I'll start with the second one first because that's kind of the history. So after World War II, when the U.S. won the war, basically, there was this thing called the Bretton Woods Agreement. Actually, one of the Hexagon community members was just there and sent me a picture from the Bretton Woods room where they signed the agreement in his Hex shirt, which was awesome.
This is DeFi. We have to learn about this.
Yeah, it was like photo bombing. So that agreement basically took the entire international financial system, pegged it to the US dollar, and then pegged the US dollar to gold. And so gold was like the anchor for this monetary system, because gold historically was the store of value in a physical. So if you're going to talk about hard currency, most people still are referring to a precious metal like gold. And so that lasted for several decades, but it was in 1971 when the US went off the gold standard. Some of you guys might know there's like this website, WTF 1971. Like everything changed that year, because once we went off the gold standard, the entire thing became freely floating. That's when we actually became fiat currency, because fiat currency is not backed by any physical commodity. And so that's also kind of when central banks come into play, because gold was the anchor to the value of the US dollar. Now it's a managed value through this printing process. And, central banks don't print money for fun. It's not really about the currency and the pieces of paper. It's really about the money supply and liquidity. And it really is that dual mandate, price stability and maximum employment. And so during recessions, they print more to try and prevent the recession from being worse. That's what they did during COVID. Now that we're in this expansion, you get higher inflation. That's when they're trying to pull it back to try and slow things down. So that in terms of this year and next year, the big macro debate is, can they accomplish a soft landing? That means kind of like slowing the economy, but then landing it without causing it to crash. Because historically, when the Fed raises rates, that results in the next recession. And so they're trying to kind of raise rates slowly now and kind of land the plane.
Interesting. I love talking about this stuff. Hodpril, do you have any clarifying questions on that?
Oh yeah, just more of a comment talking about how when the interest rates recently were raised, people, especially in the crypto community, kind of moved around, kind of freaked out a bit. It is a bear market, but like, they really do have their eye on legacy finance more than some people realize. It's like, well, what does this mean for us? Either it's a bear or people are going to ape into this, right? But
yes. I'm so glad you brought that up, Hodpril, because interest rates in TradFi affect crypto pricing. Like when the Fed raises interest rates, that makes traditional bonds more attractive. It basically increases the yield in the TradFi market, which then makes it more attractive relative to the crypto market. So part of why we saw the crypto bull market during COVID is because all central banks were lowering TradFi yield, which then causes people to search for yield in the crypto market. Now that yields are rising in TradFi, people are starting to shift some of their funds back out of crypto into TradFi. So the two markets definitely move together. So as a crypto investor, if you can understand what's going on with the economy, what's the Fed going to do, what's the forecast for interest rates, that can help you figure out and predict how it might impact crypto prices.
Yeah, that's I think that's really interesting. And I think you've got a paper on your CV, on your website, that kind of talks about the relationship between the Federal Reserve and banking system in general. And it was interesting to see the governance of the whole thing, in that the Federal Reserve, had people from the banking system that's on its board of directors. And it's like, well, I found that to be, and then so they're kind of regulating the regulator, which was a bit interesting. And I know that you've talked, at length on Twitter and in your stream with Heartbeat about the value of Hex. And so we might get on to the next question. It might flow into the next question quite nicely. So I believe you coined the term Hexanomics. Can you please describe what it is? And is Hex best described as a bond or an option or a certificate of deposit?
Well, yeah, I love this term Hexanomics. It turns out I did not coin it. It did exist. I think it was somebody posted something maybe from like 2021 or something.
No one.
And so my job is just to normalize it and get it out there so that people think about, how does economics relate to Hex? That's really what that term is about. And the economics of Hex, to your point. So, if folks saw some of my Twitter kind of activity earlier in the week, it really was me trying to kind of understand and put my thoughts out there in terms of how does Hex relate, in particular with staking, and this idea of, is it a CD? So one of the questions I've gotten asked is like, how did I kind of see Hex when I first encountered it? And the whole idea of like, pitching something as a certificate of deposit that is based on a speculative asset, to me, that was like, I actually get it now. Like the mechanics are kind of like a CD. So like I'm more sympathetic to that now than I was. But for traditional people, like if they're thinking CD, they typically think safety, not risk taking. And, yes, it's generating yield, but it's still in Hex. And so the value of Hex is very volatile. So that's kind of one reason I don't love the CD analogy. I get it. I started talking about whether it's a bond. Partly, a lot of people talked about staking ladders. Bond ladders are a big thing in TradFi because in the world of bonds, it's interest rate risk, this very thing we were just talking about. So when rates rise, the value of a bond falls, and it's based on duration. So long-term bonds are more sensitive to interest rates, and so you want to hold a portfolio of short-term and long-term. Very actually similar to like a staking portfolio or a staking ladder that people have talked about. So there's a lot of interesting analogies there. And then lastly, the option thing I put out there. I think some people that was a big turnoff of like, well, it's not a derivative and options are so speculative. But to me, that was really trying to get at the heart of the value proposition of like, where does that yield come from? Because people talk about it's like an orchard and you're planting trees, and to me, it's like I'm not hating on that analogy, but like trees grow on the ground with dirt, and there's like sunlight and water. Like, what is the input here that is producing that output? That's where, like, when in the movie, it was like that's where I'm so frustrated, because that screams Ponzi scheme. When you have something that's growing and it's not obvious why it's growing or what the input is. But I've really like started to appreciate that there is this, somebody used the word like symbiotic relationship between stakers and non-stakers or holders of like, stakers are giving up the option to sell and holders are retaining that option. And so stakers are compensated for giving up that option. Like you are locking your money, you're burning it, you're pulling it off market. That's benefiting the holders. And so like, I get that as a financial economist, like that is actually sounds more like an option contract because you're providing a service and you're being compensated for that.
And I think Goldkey, he made this excellent comment. And he said it's almost like a DAO, like you're taking a vote on how you feel the interest should be distributed in the system. And if you feel people should have on average less interest, then you would stake more and you would kind of like dilute that interest for stakers, or if you wanted to speculate on the price a little bit more, then you wouldn't stake as much. And each of those stakers would be getting a higher interest each. So I thought that was like a pretty interesting concept. And just when I think that I've got the mechanics of hex staking and all the nuances down, I always find like a new way of thinking about it. And it is like kind of like a layered onion in that. And we wanted to get onto this later, but we may as well just throw it in the mix now that we've even got secondary systems within the ecosystem that nourish stakers. So it's not just about the staking mechanics, although they're super brilliant in and of itself. And I don't think there has been really anything like it on the blockchain before. And it's not until you kind of sit with the concept of Hex and you hear about it and learn about it in different ways over a period of even months or years that you can truly appreciate the genius in the code. And it's not just about, stakers not being able to sell because you can time your stakes. And PulseChain, it's a new playing field because the gas fees are not like Ethereum. So again, that might incentivize people to do multiple shorter stakes rather than longer stakes. So there's probably like 100 or 200 pieces of little bits of information that make staking brilliant. But that, in fact, most people, and I don't know the exact numbers, but I think it's something like only 10% of Hex is actually staked. So although we start off when we're learning about Hex, knowing all about staking, a lot of people are also holding it liquid. And when it comes to like the value of Hex, Tommy did like a brilliant video that essentially was to say it's us, like it's decentralized finance, it's the community, it's the individuals and Metcalfe's law and the network effect. And this group narrative speculating that the price will go up and we believe it to go up and therefore it does and it will. And that's definitely what happened for Hex. And a lot of people in the broader crypto community at the time, like last cycle when Hex did a 10,000x, which is when people still call it a scam and a Ponzi. I mean, it's been around for now more than 2 or 3 or however many years. And the fact that it proven itself to have done the 10,000x, which is verifiable on the blockchain, I think we've sort of gotten over the point where we even need to defend against the Hex and scam narrative. And we're onto this more brilliant playing field whereby PulseChain has a copy of Hex. So Richard Hart fixed that fee because people, when they ended their stakes on Ethereum, the end stake, just to pay the gas to end the stake was too much, which is why PulseChain was invented. So you get a copy of Hex now. So you've got Hex on Ethereum and you've got Hex on PulseChain, in addition to the other Richard Hart products. So the native coin of PulseChain being PLS, which would be like the equivalent, of course, for ETH to Ethereum. And then you've got the DEX coin, the PLSX, and the incentive farm token, the INC. And these are actually all bonded together. And their ratios are they're not fixed, but they're relatively constant. For example, one Hex will get you about 200 PLS, and one PLS will get you about 3 PLSX. And then there's a ratio between the E-Hex and the P-Hex, which is probably changing a bit more than the other ratios. But generally speaking, they're bonded together in liquidity, and their price kind of moves up and down. So for me personally, out of all of those Richard Hart products, like I personally believe PLS for this cycle is going to be the best performer. That's my opinion. But because they're all bonded in liquidity, I have, like, in my portfolio all of the other coins because I know that they're going to move up together. And maybe I've got it wrong. Maybe it's PLSX that's going to be the winner. Maybe it's Hex on PulseChain. But whatever the driver is, they're bonded in their liquidity by what we call Hart's law. So the ecosystem, it's brilliant in many ways. It's brilliant because of the staking, the coding of the staking, and just the staking kind of mechanics. It's brilliant in that we have all these other coins that are going to play together, and we have this joint narrative that the price will go up. And that's really the value. It's the people and it's the Metcalfe's law. And that's why we're excited to have you in the community, because you're such a voice of reason, and you have a very eloquent speaking manner. And you seem to dampen down our crazy when we get a little bit too bunker.
That's good.
I hope not too much.
It's really good. No, we need it, honestly.
I mean, we love being crazy and all, but it's nice to have, someone bring us back down to earth.
It's actually
every
nice
once
to
in a
have a
while.
voice of reason between, like, Hex maxis and Bitcoin maxis, to be like, you guys are actually you're being a little bit silly. Like, we can be a little bit more moderated in the way that we speak to each other, in the way that we act online. So your presence has been just amazing. Do you have any questions about, like, the ecosystems, like the PulseChain or some of the staking sort of secondary sort of products?
Yeah, so people have been great about just allowing me to be in the community and ask questions. And I have started hearing about Hedron and some of these other products. And, I'm actually more of a finance person now than an economics person. And so the idea of, like, creating a secondary market for staking, for stakes, I think makes a lot of sense, especially as NFTs. I would say, so I've kind of put out there, like, I didn't research PulseChain for the movie. That was they had already filmed all my stuff before it even launched. But the question I do have, and I'll tweet this out later because I would be interested in getting people's feedback, is, so my understanding is it's a fork of the Ethereum blockchain. But, as a fork, then the question is, okay, well, what is the consensus mechanism for this new blockchain? And so, every blockchain has to have a system for verifying transactions on that blockchain. That's what makes it decentralized. There's no trusted third party that kind of keeps track of this distributed ledger, because blockchain is distributed ledger technology. And so who's kind of tracking the ledger as it changes over time, as there's more transactions? And that's, like, I know there's been a lot of pushback on Bitcoin mining, but, that's what miners do for the Bitcoin blockchain. They're verifying transactions. So, I've kind of talked on this idea of, like, the security of the network. You can build all kinds of cool applications on the network, but you have to have a secure network. That's what miners do for Bitcoin. Ethereum transitioned from proof of work to proof of stake this last September. So, It's now not mining. It's like validators and stakers, the other kind of staking. And so I am curious, and I don't know whether you want to speak to this or whether this is like just an open question I can put out there on Twitter, but like, who are the people who are the validators or the miners for PulseChain to kind of maintain that decentralization of the underlying network?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'll answer it as best I can, and definitely we'll get Hodpool to answer as well and post it online, and you'll get different perspectives and you'll get really technical perspectives as well. But essentially, so PulseChain is a copy of Ethereum. So it's the same staking function really as Ethereum, because we're a full system state copy. And we're 100% decentralized. So there's 32,000 validators, but there's 5,000 people that are the validators. And anybody can be a validator. There's no central pool of validators. Richard, they started off doing the validators, obviously, to secure the network, and then they completely decentralized it and shut down all of their validators. So there's 5,000 validators, and you need 32 million pulse to be a validator. Anyone can be a validator. And essentially, you lock up your PLS. So you've essentially staked your PLS, and that's what's securing the network. And yeah, that's it. It's just exactly the same as Ethereum, because we forked them basically. And why fork Ethereum? Because we needed cheaper gas fees. The reason Ethereum was forked was to solve the gas fee problem. And PulseChain is also faster. So it's cheaper and faster are probably the main two benefits, but the cheaper gas fees so that people could end a stake, because some people had smaller stakes in Ethereum and the gas fee exceeded what they would get for their stake.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the line in the sand where Richard said, we have to fork Ethereum because all these people can't end their stake. And that's terrible because they've held on to their stakes forever. So everybody got a copy of everything, including their stakes. So we have our stakes on Ethereum, and we got our free copy of stakes on PulseChain. So Hodpool, do you want to talk about securing the network and the validators?
Yeah, there are. It works as Ethereum does. We have validators, really like over 5,000 validators. Everybody has their own, machine, their own, and I mean, in a sense, that does make it relatively decentralized. If you're distributing all of that, responsibility among that many people. A lot of validators in Hex are well-known people in the community too. So a lot of them are trusted, respected. You could even see some of their actions on the chain. Some of them stream a lot. I mean, you'll if you ask what people are validators, like on Twitter in our community, they'll come and tell you their favorite ones. There are a few. I don't know if I'll say their names because I don't want to play favorites with the validators. But yes, you do stake to them. It is a lot easier to become a validator on the PulseChain because it's cheaper, right? 32 Ethereum to be a validator on the ETH blockchain. It's very expensive, and you need the hardware. You need to be relatively, I think, to be a decent validator, you need to understand there's a responsibility, and you kind of constantly do need to make sure your hardware is up to speed and that everything's going okay. And it's quite a responsibility, but there are people really dedicated in our community to the whole chain. So it is cheaper. More people are getting into validating PulseChain. The gas fees are smaller because they've increased the throughput on the Ethereum chain. So that's why there's lower gas fees. In addition, there's, less movement on the chain. So, it's just it's easier. I think it's an easier entry to become a validator, but it works the same as the Ethereum blockchain since it's a hard fork.
Cool. Yeah, I look forward to learning more about it, and I can see that Motley Investor posted that resource.
Yeah.
Wow, that's really cool.
Pulse is awesome.
It's, oh my gosh, it's such a cool website. Like even for a portfolio tracker, you just put in all your wallets and it includes the farms as well. So
I love
what
this
a great
dev.
resource.
It's awesome.
So cool. And thanks for the comment, Motley. I appreciate that. Okay, we're going to get into a couple more questions, and then we're going to go to the chat and try to answer some of their questions. So next question, how can cryptocurrency fit into a portfolio with traditional assets? And what has led to the shift in mainstream entities such as BlackRock supporting Bitcoin ETFs?
Yeah, so I think in the film I try to make it pretty clear, like I'm pretty pro crypto. I own crypto. And so, I'm very much out there encouraging people to explore it and invest in crypto. I do think it's this emerging asset class for investors. I am not a fan of people sort of putting all their eggs in one basket. I think there's a little bit of that in the movie. I think, Richard and I disagreed on some of that. I am a fan of diversification. I know that like the upside is not as high, but it also means the downside is not as low. So it really comes down to risk preference and tolerance. I tend to, want to think about, one of the big concepts in finance is also like the risk frontier. And so like, how do you kind of get a collection of assets that aren't perfectly correlated so that then, they're not always rising and falling at the same time. So one piece of my portfolio, might be doing poorly, but at least I've got other stuff that's not falling at the same time. And so, stocks like are still my go-to investment. Like it's just, I come out of TradFi, and so crypto is a part of my portfolio, but I consider it kind of that risk frontier, the more speculative part. I've got this, I think pretty helpful analogy I use a lot with TradFi folks or no coiners is think about like the NASDAQ. So in the US, the tech stocks, so NASDAQ being the tech sector, sort of most TradFi people who are in the stock market own tech stocks, but then you also have like industrial stocks, like the blue chips. And so blue chips are, low volatility, low return, tech stocks, high volatility, high return. I think of crypto as just like the tail on that frontier, like it is the tech frontier. So what tech stocks are to industrial stocks, crypto is to tech stocks. That's like one of my favorite talking points and just trying to help them understand this. And so, yeah, I think it should be part of everybody's portfolio. It's just a question of scale. I think there's a lot of wealth managers who are starting to talk about 3% to 5%, just to give you that upside potential. But it is still that alternative asset class. So I don't consider it to be kind of the core of a traditional portfolio.
Thank you for your answer. I'll just push back a little bit on that in terms of stocks. So if we say that stocks make people 7 or 8% per year, but the money printing is at 5%, people are left with something maybe, if they're lucky, if they can save for 30 or 40 years of 2% per year. So in my mind, like even entities such as BlackRock can see the writing on the wall with these, there's not much meat on the bone, so to say. And even real estate, which is traditionally doubled every 7 to 10 years, if you're lucky on average. And let's assume that it will still do that, although maybe it will, maybe it won't, depending on your type of house and all the other variables. Well, the interest rate hikes, we've had 12 interest rate hikes this year, which are crippling basically middle income earners, absolutely crippling them. And part of the reason is, of course, to control inflation, using higher interest rates to control inflation. But I believe some of the underlying narratives are wrong. There's an underlying narrative to say, there must be so much demand, all these people buying all of these goods and services, driving the price up, and the inflation is out of control. That's not the case. There's been a lot of money printing that has happened to have caused the inflation. And there's been a supply drop, not an increase in demand. And so middle income earners have caught the brunt of this with the higher interest rates. So real estate and shares, unfortunately, people look at their 401k, or for me, it would be my super balance at the end of each year. And I'm pretty disappointed. And also, although I have a high income, I'm pouring my income into my mortgages because of these very high interest rates. So it's almost like this shift of no coiners saying, I need, this is not helping me financially. I actually need something else. And I think more people are sort of being open to a higher risk asset. And there is a lot of speculation. There's no doubt that cryptocurrency is highly speculative. And not only that, like from a technical perspective, you press the wrong button and you've lost your asset. And you can't just ring up and go, oh my God, I've been scammed. Give me my money back. I want my insurance to pay for this. It doesn't work like that. There's no phone number. No one's going to give you your coins back. People probably laugh at you on the internet. They will troll the shit out of you if you do get scammed.
It happens.
It happens. And a lot of people scam themselves and they blame other people and say, I've been scammed. When in fact, they actually scammed themselves and they just found their local scammer and gave them their seed phrase. So yes, crypto is highly speculative, but a lot of people are heading that way out of necessity. And it is about right product market fit. Like you do need to find a founder that you trust. You do need to find a community that is so enthusiastic that they are called a cult. And I believe that like Hexagons, PulseChains, we do fit that bill. Although I
found my cult. I'm thrilled.
Yeah, we have a happy little cult members. I got a white
this
dress
at the beekeeping store. I got this at the bee
start
shop.
wearing my white dress on this stream because like we are happy little cult members. But look, you make valid points. Like it's so speculative. Like there's this huge range that can happen, but it's the joint belief that we will get the price action that we want, and it's hundreds of thousands of people joining in on that belief, and our power as a community to adopt new people into the ecosystem. I think that's where the value sort of comes from. And Richard Hart is he's a good human being. He had a phase of outrage marketing, which for people that come from legacy and traditional finance is not acceptable to them. It doesn't fit with their culture at all. It actually grates against it. He's like a very clever man, and he did that on purpose for exposure. And are we moving away from that kind of narrative and that kind of way of marketing? Yes, we are. We are still pretty feisty online though, because we've had years of being trolled by the by the BTC maxis. So yeah, and like I said before, it's great to have you to kind of dampen us down a little bit online as well.
Yeah, it's like that BTC Maxi stuff. I put out a few of those tweets and tagged BTC, and man, like I started getting trolled. I was like, all right, well, like I just got a very tiny taste of this, and so I could see why people have PTSD.
Yeah, like even I don't get trolled too much because I don't have like a great Twitter presence, but I got trolled yesterday, and I'm good at not engaging, except yesterday, the trolls, they find the right words, hey? And if they hit the right words, rah, reaction. And then I'm like, oh, I've reacted.
Text me first, class.
Anyway, we all get sucked in. Yeah, so my point in amongst all of that I just said was that people are they're coming into crypto out of necessity, I feel, because they're
if I could say, I did want to follow up on that comment about interest rates. So I do think one thing I would say about rising interest rates is whether that makes you better or worse off in TradFi kind of depends on your investments, your debt, and things like that. So like rising interest rates definitely makes it harder to buy a house because mortgage rates are increasing. And so the cost of ownership of buying a house is getting much harder. But if you think about like somebody who's saving in a rising interest rate economy, instead of borrowing in a rising interest rate economy, they're actually better off. And so if you think about like Hex as a blockchain CD, part of the appeal of Hex was the yield was so much higher than like 0% or 1%. Now, you might not think that like 5% sounds like a lot, but in TradFi, like 5% is a lot. And like Apple Card coming out with this savings account, like they have generated massive amounts of deposits because people now say like, dude, I can earn 5% taking zero risk and it's FDIC insured. Like that creates like an opportunity in the TradFi market.
Yeah, but you're favoring the wealthiest people, the only people that are at advantage. It doesn't favor renters because renters paying a higher rent to compensate for the higher interest rate. You're not favoring people that are actually paying off their mortgages because they have lesser chance of paying it off in their time frame because they've got these variable rates that have gone through the roof. So you're favoring the wealthiest people. And the thing that sort of like hits me about traditional finance is the whole structure is set up to protect the wealthy. Companies don't really pay as much tax as middle income, high and middle income workers. So there's more tax benefits. They don't have to be at the mercy of the interest rates. They can just laugh at all the people and say, oh, well, why haven't you paid off your home yet? And even like with an initial company offerings or whatever the term is that you would use, as an everyday person, you're not allowed to participate. You have to be accredited or some kind of accredited investor. So the traditional finance system is weighted heavily in favoring people that are already supremely wealthy. And that's why you get, all of these kind of tradies and people that aren't from traditional finance and so-called degenerates online that are so passionate about crypto, because for once we can see that a person that has grown up poor without money, that didn't inherit any money, has a chance to like fight to actually, have a place and to change, to have generational wealth. So that's another reason why we're so passionate about crypto, because we don't get the same opportunities in traditional finance.
Yeah, no, those are all fair points. I think the one thing I would offer in exchange to that is not to disagree with it or argue with it, but there was for instance, there was one thread where there was some discussion about crypto and in particular Hex, marketing. Who are the future buyers and stakers of Hex? What is that future demographic for you? And I think an untapped market in crypto are the young urban professionals. In the US, we call them yuppies. It's a bit of a derogatory term. But when I think about my students here in Chicago who are graduating, they're getting jobs that are paying very well. And they're starting to look at, how am I going to invest this money as a 20-something? And they're hearing about crypto, and I think they're very curious and interested about crypto. But if the crypto community is saying to them, traditional finance is dumb, it's evil, it's worthless, if it's so extreme that it's saying we are this kind of option that is the only legitimate option and everything else, the stock market, is totally illegitimate, I think that's a turnoff to young urban professionals, because they don't want to totally burn down everything and build it from scratch. They're looking for, how can I invest in an emerging technology? And that's a very different type of communication than burn it down. Does that make sense?
There are a lot of doomers. There are a lot of doomer people posting. And the thing is that Overton window, right? You almost need these extreme doomer types to almost outrage market crypto into the sphere of, being talked about when anything in legacy finance is happening, just to get their words heard, because otherwise there's a lot of just pump and dump scam crypto stuff that lasts just a short amount of time. It gives people a bad name, because so many people are promoting their own token instead of talking about the utility of the blockchain and how it works.
Yes, and I think people are commenting, like David here in the chat. I've heard so much about outrage marketing and this phrase, you got to punch through the noise. To me, punch through the noise, that works for certain demographics. If I shout loud enough, somebody's going to hear me. But for young urban professionals, that is a total turnoff. And so it's kind of a shift in the mindset of sometimes when you speak softer and more rationally, the people who are more rational will start to listen.
You know what I'll say about that? Creative energy is not like that, usually. In order to create something, to get something heard, you need to think outside of the box and be a little bit different. That's not necessarily also the most organized and responsible way to act, but a lot of crypto things, because I've been here a while. I used to be, BTCE, Mt. Gox days, all the marketing that some of these relatively centralized exchanges did, where it was absolutely outrageous, and in places you would never think of, and the places that you were not appropriate, that now that they have normal people watching it, they have to behave. But in order to get to that spot, they had to be outrageous.
Yeah, so I agree with you in a sense. Like, I'm not suggesting that crypto or the Hexicans become a bunch of like buttoned up suits. Like, you guys you're not Wall Street. You never want to be Wall Street. And most yuppies, I think, actually agree with you. They are now turned off by Wall Street. The financial crisis was a huge turnoff for young people in terms of traditional finance and the stock market. But I think, Hot Pearl, your point, like, I think you should.
And I agree with you too.
And I think you should. The community, part of why I'm having so much fun interacting with the Hexicans is because you're funny, you're creative, you think outside the box. Like, that's all the things that people love about crypto. Like, you can be all those things without being angry. Does that make sense?
Good luck in the bear market. There's a lot of people mad. But no, I know what you mean. Yeah. Absolutely.
But when you think about like any change, like any system state change, there is going to be a little volatility. Because if you think there's a finite, at any one moment in time, there's a finite amount of resources, and there's somebody that's holding more of the resources and more of the power and the money than other people, and people are calling for a better, a change, there is going to be pushback. And we won't get into the SEC stuff today because we are going to wrap it up. And I think we've had such great conversation, and Professor Black is going to be on other streams to address those. But before we go, a quick announcement. So I am going to gift one of Professor Black's students $200 worth of Hex in the form of a 2-year HSI stake, and $200 worth of PLS. For the student who produces the best paper on Hexanomics as judged by Professor Black. And I will be doing a Twitter post if anyone wants to sponsor any other students to see how many we can get sponsored. And it's not a pressure thing. We're at the bottom of the bear market, which is terrible to ask people to donate to, which I'm not doing. But if people are compelled to, then I will be posting a public wallet address. But it's also the best time to onboard. So I have been doing more streams than usual lately because we're at the bottom, we're at capitulation zone. And then my streaming and online presence will probably throughout the cycle actually lessen off because I'm not wanting to onboard at the peak of the cycle. So
real
watch
quick,
out for...
That's an HSI is Hex Stake Instance, for those who don't know.
Yes.
That's it.
Yeah. Thank you, Hodprop. So watch out for that Twitter post. So we're going to sign out because I want Professor Black to get to dinner in time and still to stream with other Hexican Poskins. So Professor Black, is there any final comments? Do you want to tell people where they can find you?
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter, Lamont K. Black. And I think a lot of people have already found me there, but if you haven't, please do. On LinkedIn. So if you do wear any button-up shirts and you want to meet on LinkedIn, happy to sit there. And also my website, lamontblack.com.
Thank you.
And
I just
want to say thank you to everybody. I'm having such a great time. It's been such a fun week. And
we love having you here.
We're enjoying talking to you and being part of the community. And we do have Wall Street people as well. We're very diverse community. And Hodpro, any final comments?
Yeah, you were awesome in the movie. It was a really enjoyable experience. So thank you for being a part of it.
Yeah. If anybody is in an area where you can see the movie, please do. Come to Chicago. Saturday night.
So many people. Toby, Maddie.
I will see you tomorrow. Toby's going to be there. Maddie.
Oh my gosh. We're going to sign out. Thank you, chat. Appreciate your presence. Sorry I didn't get to all your questions. Yeah. Thanks, everyone. Have a great night.